Welcome, friends, to a presentation on honoring our LGBTQ plus religious elders. I am Mark Bowman, Executive Director of the LGBTQ Religious Archives Network, the host of tonight's program. LGBTQ RAN is a unique venture dedicated to preserving the history of LGBTQ religious movements around the world. LGBTQ RAN is a digital enterprise. We are not a physical repository that stores papers. We advise and support leaders and groups in their efforts to preserve their records in appropriate repositories. Furthermore, we collect and provide a treasure of historical information on our website about LGBTQ plus persons and groups from a wide array of religious expressions around the world. And finally, we encourage research and scholarship in queer religious history. Tonight, we will hear from educator Camille Shira Angel and students in her innovative University of San Francisco class entitled Honoring Our LGBTQ plus Religious Elders. This intergenerational learning experience matches a cohort of students with a queer person of faith elder activist. The students interview and get to know the elder, and then create a short video portraying that person's life and work. In this webinar, you will see two different videos about elders created by students, and Rabbi Angel will invite students to reflect on what they learned in this experience. Rabbi Camille Shira Angel is the campus rabbi for Jewish life and multi-faith LGBTQIA+ spiritual life at the University of San Francisco, where she is faculty in the SWIG program in Jewish Studies and Social Justice. Along with her popular courses, Queering Religion, Beyond Gender, and Honoring Our LGBTQ+ Religious Elders, she runs LGBTQ spiritual exploration retreats for the university ministry. Angel is a 9th generation rabbi, 2nd generation Reform rabbi, and is a proud graduate of the Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion. From 2000 to 2015, Rabbi Angel served as a spiritual leader of San Francisco's historically LGBTQ congregation, Shahar Zahav. During her tenure, she oversaw the publication of Siddur Shahar Zahav. Rabbi Angel has written widely on creative liturgy, Judaism, and LGBTQ issues. Now, I am pleased to welcome Rabbi Camille Shira Angel to begin this presentation.
Thank you, Mark. So just a brief overview of our course. Mark just told us what we're doing, but I want to welcome my students who've completed the course, and I'm so excited to have you with me here today to share widely with a larger audience the work that we've been doing and the legacies that you have been celebrating. So we call our work these conscious conversations. So we make these pairs that are somewhat random to begin with, at least. And the students meet their elders, and for 14 weeks, they work in small groups interviewing one another. Before I tell you much more, we want to kind of set the presence for this time and offer an opening blessing. It's twilight here in San Francisco, just about, or the sun is setting. And this prayer is taken from Siddur Shahar Zahav. You'll find a link later in the presentation. It's a fabulous text book and prayer book for anyone to have and share. So my students, will you take yourselves off mute and begin?
As the sun sinks and the colors of the day turn, we offer a blessing for the twilight, for twilight is neither day nor night, but in between. We are all twilight people. We can never be fully labeled or defined. We are many identities and loves, many genders and none. We are in between roles, at the intersection of histories, or between place and place. We are crisscrossed paths of memory and destination, streaks of light swirled together. We are neither day nor night. We are both, neither, and all.
May the sacred in-between of this evening suspend our certainties, soften our judgments, and widen our vision. May this in-between light illuminate our way to the God who transcends all categories and definitions. May the in-between people who have come to pray be lifted up into this twilight. We cannot always define. We can always say a blessing. Blessed are you, God of all, who brings on the twilight.
Thank you, Drew. One of the gifts of this class is the chance for students to meet queer people who have claimed their religious identity and made it and adapted it and created something new that's authentic. And so using this prayer book to give voice to, hear these words Rabbi Reuben Zellman wrote. Reuben was, I think, is considered one of the, if not the first, transgender student at Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion. And he joins and has been inspiring many other trans Jews to find their spiritual path and leadership voice. So this is a special piece that all my classes come to know and love. So again, to share a text with you that kind of is a foundational text for us when we're thinking about our work. This is a piece also from the Siddur on holiness, where we see verses from Leviticus that inspire us to lead ethical lives, and we bring them together with our identities. And so it's an obligation. It's a righteous and religious obligation and opportunity for us to honor the aged, and here it is. So we are elderly lesbians, bisexuals, gay men, and transgender people. You shall rise before the aged and show deference to the old. So helping our elders identify as elders is also part of the challenge of this course. Most of all of us didn't have queer history in our educations, private or public. It wasn't until Mark Leno introduced and made legislation that in the state of California, in civics, middle school and high school, you have to engage with material on our queer history. But a lot of people, the memo hasn't penetrated to the curriculum. And so thinking about and talking about our history and queer lives and queer experiences, and how we reconciled with our faith and background and traditions. That is a cathartic experience for anyone to be in the classroom and have that be the content. It's the core anti-oppressive pedagogy. My students, they interview across the generations. They're in small groups. These are some of the topics they cover. And they're using these values that are essential in Jewish life. They're realizing how to live these values in relating to people. Maybe it's in the form of a thank you note. We write a lot of thank you notes in our class. And there's always the question of, like, from generation to generation, in which direction, who's doing the learning? We're all doing the learning across the generations. So I'll stop here, and I'd like my students to introduce themselves and say a word about where they are in their lives, a sentence before they answer a kind of a general question. The arc of the questions is kind of like, what did you learn? And so what about it? And now what are you going to do with the encounters and experiences and wisdom you've gained? So someone to start. I'll take a few, if you would introduce yourselves, and then we'll roll Nancy's film.
Hi, I can start. So I'm Sydney, right? I am a second year and I'm studying critical diversity studies and English literature, and I read a lot of books. So I learned a lot in this class, but I came into it with the context of a lot of one of my majors is gender and sexuality studies. So I spend a lot of time discussing queer identities in history, which I'm very privileged to have. So it's always felt kind of impersonal. It's very, this is what this is. People can identify these ways. And I've kind of noticed that with history is that we treat it as though a lot of those makers are gone when they're not. Just like queer elders, we kind of treat them like that time in history, they're stuck there and they don't continue to live, which doesn't really make sense, but that's the way we treat history. So we trap these individuals in one moment and they become characters in a narrative rather than people in our shared world. And I really got to explore that concept in this class and specifically see the human in history. I got to learn the stories that culminated into or stemmed from these events. I learned a lot of different things that are left out entirely through deep conversations, which also further showed me the value of deep conversations, which many of us avoid, including myself. Nancy, who is a curator and was my assigned elder, although it feels weird to claim her like that, helped teach me the value of art and activism, specifically Grand Fury and ACT UP, because while I may have subconsciously known the value of the visual, I did not truly understand. For example, she shared some of her exhibitions with us, including one that stood out to me called Gender Fiction, which used art to explore the idea that gender is fiction, which is already a very cool idea. And they all displayed this concept so uniquely, and I just feel like that really expresses history, but we're often taught one perspective, this is how it is, even though it never is, which kind of drew me back to the idea of like, do as I do, not do as I say, but we often do as we say. And these conversations started to break that down, and through these videos, I realized that we're able to carry history as what it is, which is just a human trying to get through the world and ultimately make it a better place.
Hello, my name is Harley. I'm a second year physics major with a minor in astrophysics. So compared to Sydney, very, very different background coming into this class. I, in all honesty, came into this class with very little knowledge of queer history. I'd like to think I knew kind of the like kind of highlights, so to speak, although highlights isn't quite the right word. And after getting to take this course and do the readings and talk to all the elders, including the elder I was paired with, Nancy, as well, I learned about queer history on such a deeper level, and I feel like I'm left with this sense of appreciation for the people who came before me that I didn't have when I started this class. And now, leaving this class, I am carrying that appreciation with me as I continue on to eventually grad school and then, working, both as a gender fluid person and a queer person in STEM.
Thanks, Harley. Hillary, can we hear from you, and then we'll show your film?
Hi, I'm Hillary. I am a third year student at the University of San Francisco. I'm majoring in kinesiology with minors in health studies and gerontology. I learned a lot in this course. I also went into this course not really knowing anything about queer history because my previous teachers didn't really touch upon it. I think the greatest thing that I got from this course was encapsulating the idea of identity and how it's so intersectional. There's aspects of like gender and age, religion, queerness, and I really got to appreciate how life is just a journey of like self-discovery, like learning who you are, and how all these different people and things that happen can impact it, and that it's okay to have those things impact you and to change and to have the courage to change and to eventually find like a balance between all of those and to have your identity be a mosaic of all these different aspects of who you are. And I also learned that intergenerational connection is so important because people who are older than me, my elders, they have the experience and are able to give me advice and to connect with me on a level that I didn't, and to be able to help me through this process of finding who I am, and in return having me connect with them and having this back and forth.
I love this back and forth. So let's share out your video of our elder and wise friend, Nancy Gonkar.
You know, it's not set in stone. Nothing is really. So I was born in a small town in Pennsylvania called Hazleton, in the northeast part of Hazleton near Wilkes-Barre. You might have heard that, or Scranton. So I was brought up in this small town for the first 7 years of my life, and there was a fairly sizable Jewish community. I grew up in a small development with a lot of young married couples who had young children. And so it was a very warm group of friends that my parents had. I do remember feeling really embraced by all of them and seen in a way that children aren't usually included. And it was just a warm and very caring environment. You know, though I've never been a particularly observant Jew, meaning I don't go to synagogue, I consider myself a cultural Jew, but my identity is very important to me. Passovers are both serious and joyous. I think that's where I really learned about being a Jew and what it meant to be a Jew in that particular situation where my family was conducting a particular ritual and telling us what they thought was important about Judaism. One was not to ever forget the Holocaust. Another message was that we all needed to try to make the world a better place to expose that kind of cruelty and work against it. So there's an activist strain that runs in most Jewish community and identity, and I certainly got that message. I think I was kind of a quiet activist, and I guess I should define that, which is that I went to marches. I was loud at marches, but I was very shy for a long time, so I was a more quiet, behind the scenes person. I got into the arts in undergraduate school. I was always interested in photography. So I wanted to do things. So I took a lot of art classes where I could use my hands and get out in the world and, you know, take photographs and stuff. I went to a kind of experimental art school. It was photography, film, video, media studies. So it was kind of on the cutting edge, more avant-garde. Some of us had been out for much longer, and so they were introducing the ones who weren't to all the lesbian fiction and the gay fiction and the beginnings of the theory. And that was kind of the art world that I was part of. And so we were all pushing the boundaries of the art world, pushing the boundaries of what was acceptable in the larger culture. We were all exploring our identities and our genders in different ways and playing with them. But I was pretty consistently comfortable with a certain kind of presentation. If I would really describe myself, I guess I would say androgynous. You know, so when I was first coming out, it was really fun to express the masculine part of my personality and my outward appearance and stuff, and I was into that. And as I got older, I realized I was much more fluid than that, and I wanted to be able to express all the parts of who I am. I remember the first Halloween party I went to where I dressed in drag. So I went to a costume store in the theater district and got an actual mustache. And so it was a very convincing one. And I went to this Halloween party, and I looked at myself in the mirror and I looked like a man. And it was disconcerting all of a sudden my jaw looked different. And I mean, it was really disconcerting. And so I'm at this party and I can hardly talk because people don't know who I am. I mean, good friends. I was with a whole bunch of good friends. And so people were saying, "Who's that guy over there? Does anybody know who invited him?" So when I was looking for jobs after graduate school, and I wrote a letter, as a job application, part of a job application. I had my father read it, and he said, "Well, it's a really good letter, but I'm going to tell you something you're not going to like." He said, "I think you should tone it down a little. You're touting your accomplishments too strongly." I said, "You're right. I don't like that, and I'm not going to listen to you." In my curatorial career, my first job curating was at SUNY Binghamton. The art department was 9 men and 1 woman, the studio art department. I think we had 10 shows, 10 exhibitions. They got to have a 1-person show of their work. 9 out of 10 years, there was a man, a white man. Then they got to bring in an artist. That was generally a white painter. And they got to have a student show of all their students. So that left 7 shows. So I decided, well, I needed to do predominantly women and people of color and people who did political work. So none of which they were really thrilled with. When I would apply for jobs, even at really liberal institutions, they would say, "Why did you only show women? Why did you predominantly show women?" And I'd have to say, "Well, because you've been supporting men for years and years and years, white men artists." So I'm just shaking it up a little bit. What's going on with AIDS? As soon as it hit the queer community and it started to be known that it had to do with sexual practices, especially with men, obviously, it brought out a whole new wave of homophobia, cemented people's biases that they already had. It was pretty horrible time. Personally, I had a few friends who died. I had many acquaintances that I knew or that were in the art world that I knew that I would march with. I'll show you my ACT UP t-shirt, which is very worn out. ACT UP was one of the major political activist groups that grew out of the AIDS crisis almost instantly. And they had great graphics. And the design folks that did the graphics were called Grand Fury. When you marched, we had slogans. Everybody wore the t-shirts. We had posters that were on placards. And it was a very powerful movement, and it made a huge difference. Graphic design has always been, a political form. I worked at SUNY Binghamton as a curator and associate director of the art museum, and I was getting tired of it after 8 years. So I convinced them to give me a sabbatical, and I always wanted to check out San Francisco, like every queer person in the universe. But I just loved the Bay Area. I mean, I fell in love with it instantly. San Francisco was still hopping at that time. There were still women's bars and, Frameline. I'm sure you're familiar with Frameline, which is the oldest queer film festival in the world. The film festival was always in the Castro Theater until recently. And when I first moved out to California and went to my first film festival, it was so exciting because the Castro is a huge theater and it's beautiful and it was filled. So it's like 2,000, maybe 3,000 people. And it's 4 or 5 days of incredible films. But that was really exciting because it was such a positive place to be. The mission was totally different than it is now. And, the Castro was totally different than it is now, and it was really a fun place to be. So that's how I got here. And then when that was done, I just decided that I was going to find a job here. I spent so much time exploring the world and all my interests and all my inclinations, which took me in lots of different directions. And when I finally settled down in San Francisco was when I really started thinking about adopting a child. I was older, like I said, so I was really ready to make that commitment, and I didn't feel like I was giving anything up. I had decided I want to be a mother and I want to be with this child that is so wonderful. I also felt ready to share myself with a child, and I learned as much from her as I think she learned from me. And we had a good time together. We had a really good time together. She learned to love dogs because we always had dogs around. She loved to have stories read to her. She was great at games and cards, much better than me. She learned to play cards when she was really little, and the games got more complex, and she started winning all the time. Anyway, she was just a delight. I worked at the San Francisco Art Commission, and every time somebody wanted to do a mural in a public space, the Art Commission had to approve the design of it. So there was a mural in the Mission by a group of high school students called Homies, and they designed a mural, and there was one picture of a guy with his fist up wearing a Palestinian, those scarves. And so the mural got painted. So there's certain parts of the Jewish community that are more active than others, and they decided that the image was threatening to them, which I didn't agree with. But I got a call from the mayor's office that said I needed to fix the situation. I put together a group of Palestinians and Jewish folks from the Mission, and I met with them, and I said, so this was my own little Israeli-Palestinian peace process. I said, nobody's going to be happy when we're done. We're going to come up with a way to change this mural in order to make everybody be able to accept it so it doesn't have to come down. I think in the end, we took the raised fist off. When you work for the city, there are commissions and they're public and people come and testify. And it was actually really moving because there were so many people talking about how they objected to this. And in the end, people were happy with that solution.
I'm just so delighted to share that with folks. It warms my heart so much to see it again and to know that this is part of our digital repository and our archives. It's like activism. Archiving is activism, as Mason Funk says with his Outwards project. So I really want to be sure to leave time. There was a question that emerged that I'm wondering if someone from Nancy's group would be willing to answer, or from Mike's group as we prepare to watch his video. The question was, how'd you come up with these questions to get at these really deep and moving reflections? The question is, how Hillary described so well the back and forth of these conscious conversation topics. So anyone want to share, how did you come to ask the particular questions that you did to get to these stories?
I can kind of share for my group at least. The way we did it was in the beginning of the semester, kind of the first few weeks, actually, Rabbi Angel, you provided us with some kind of preliminary questions that lined up with what we were discussing in class. So when we started discussing, for example, AIDS in class, that was when we started kind of asking questions to Nancy about AIDS, for example. And then after those first couple weeks, it really came up to us. So we combined kind of, well, what was something we wanted to know more about? Something that had come up in conversation that we wanted to know more about. And then also very timely stuff. So, for example, when Passover was happening, we asked questions about Passover traditions, because Passover happened during the class. And the other kind of, I think the most important thing when we were asking these questions was that we sent them ahead of time in weekly correspondence with our elders. we sent kind of the main questions we were going to ask in our next meeting so that they could kind of prepare both mentally and also to have answers ready. And that's how we kind of got that back and forth that Hillary mentioned.
That's a beautiful answer. Relationships build over time, and you took all kinds of risks with each other over time. So let's prepare to watch Mike's film, and then we'll want to hear from you, Link, Drew, and Lily.
Honoring our elders, take 3.
Okay.
This is interview 3. Is this number 3 or 4? Oh, or 4. My name is Mike Shriver, and I just turned 61 in May. So I'm the youngest queer elder that I know. And I am a gay, HIV positive, Jewish, openly in recovery man. I live in San Francisco. I've been here since 1987. I think when you make a commitment to be an activist, you make a commitment to a life of activism. And the statement from the Jewish scholars, the Jewish wisdom, the sages, the Pirkei Avot is, you may not complete the task, but that doesn't relieve you of the obligation of continuing to work on it. And what underscored my entire life professionally and as an activist was it's what you did. Like it was all action oriented. It was all orthopractic. Like everything was about, it didn't matter if you wanted to end the AIDS epidemic, you needed to do something about it, whether that's shutting down a bridge or protesting or doing it in your work life. So the idea that here was this religious tradition that just absolutely ran parallel to the way I saw the world and the way I saw how I was supposed to be in the world. Like it's like what you do. Like this is who we are. And at my core, at my deepest level, I completely believe that we are meant to be in community. That we are only as strong as the community within which we belong. And I believe that belonging to a community is work. It's not a passive sort of, I'm here. No, I mean, it takes work. It takes work to be in a relationship. It takes work to be in a community because there's value in the work. 1989 is one of the most amazing, is probably one of the most pivotal years for my life. That's the year that we shut down the Golden Gate Bridge in January, that we occupied the INS office, which is now ICE. We occupied the INS office here for a couple of hours. We disrupted the opening of the opera. Some folks I know actually disrupted the opening of the Rose Bowl parade. And that was also the year that I tested positive. And my partner and I, my first boyfriend, the one who I left everything for and moved out here to, broke up. It was quite a year. Huge year. Yeah. Oh, and we disrupted the opening of the 5th International Conference on AIDS in Montreal. Yeah. Lo and behold, I eventually go on the board of the National AIDS Memorial, and then eventually become the chair of the board of the National AIDS Memorial, and spent a lot of my time doing work for the AIDS Grove, for the memorial, which now, of course, it's not just the National AIDS Memorial in Golden Gate Park, but also the AIDS Quilt. They're all part of the National Memorial. So when you ask me what I do now, what I've done and what I do now is the Grove. That's what I do to honor Patrick. I don't know if I could know a list, but Jimmy and Kitty, and it's what I do to honor Frank, my mentor, my boss, and Glenn, my partner, and Pedro Zamora, and all those people. That's what I do. I support this place that I thought in the late 80s, early 90s was just a crock of crap. But turned out for me, being on the board became like this incredibly important part of my recovery. Not just my physical recovery, but my sort of my emotional and spiritual recovery. The Grove is predicated on 3 words: hope, healing, and remembrance. And the idea is that as a community, we need to find a way to come together to begin to heal, to always remember, and to possibly find hope. So they created this space, and in 1991 they began creating the Grove, and it was all landscaped, architecturally landscaped. So there are features throughout this entire footprint that are about broken circles because of the break in the circle of all of our lives and relationships. And it's all about light and dark, that we move in moments of every day and through our lives, from like moments of light to moment of darkness. And it's just natural. So as you move through the Grove, spots that are light, and then you go through the forest where it's dark, and then you come out in the meadow where it's light. And they worked with the city and found this piece of property, which is 10 plus acres in Golden Gate Park, of completely derelict land. It was a garbage dump in 1991. It was just big ridges and then a basin that was filled with trash. And in 1991, they created the first community volunteer workday, and a group of volunteers came out here and, with the help of 61 dump trucks, excavated this garbage dump, this piece of derelict, abandoned land, and began the process of creating the AIDS Memorial. The idea was that if we could collectively create a space in nature, which sort of mirrors the cycle of life every year, if you could create a space in nature that people were invested physically, manually invested in, it would give us all a chance to begin to deal with grief. So, but all of my friends who had AIDS or HIV when I was, of my closest circle, there were 10 of us, my ex-boyfriend and me and 8 other guys, they're all dead. And then my next circle of friends, I'm the only one standing out of both of those circles, and I don't know why. I don't know why.
This reminded me of the idea of unclosed or interrupted circles, which is the idea that when someone loses someone to AIDS, it creates an interruption in their life. And this idea is used a lot within the AIDS Memorial Grove, which we visited with Mike, and all of the circles of names and different things that exist within the Grove are intentionally left unclosed or interrupted. And it made me think that Mike himself stands as a physical representation of this idea within these friend groups that he mentioned. He stands as a physical interruption to the circle of loss that exists for those friend groups.
The idea of using streets and access to bridges as a locus for activism has a storied tradition to that, because they use transportation to create zones, and it's how they would wall off the wrong side of the tracks, where they would start redlining and red zoning district. So if you experiencing inconvenience for a half an hour or an hour on the bridge is what turns you off of having a compassionate response to a fellow human being, you are the problem. Yeah. The opera went off. The opera happened. We did not take people away from the reason that they were there. We just merely wanted to say, before you start watching your opera, whatever it is, we want you to understand that there's a crisis going on, and that we need you to think about how you invest your discretionary dollars. I started writing this poem in 1993, I think. Mm-hmm. So this poem took a long time to write. And it just struck me that the thing that people always say to you when you're dealing with grief is like, time heals, the wound, you give it time, I've never found that to be true. It doesn't heal, it doesn't make things better, but that became the way that I could start thinking about Frankie and Glenn and my mom and Chuck, and I could take it down the list of 100 names of people, but so if time isn't what I could finally say, okay, this is what I missed the most. That was the one way that I felt like I could finally put on paper what I felt about my friends. And so it just starts out, time is just the passing of time. And living sometimes means missing things, sometimes, often at times deeply. And often what I miss is the space in between, down to the core of my being. And as with meaning, memory is after the fact. The memory of those and those things which are and now are no more. So either we buckle under the pressure and just sort of succumb and give in to despair or defeat, or you don't. And if you move into that section of I'm not going to give up, I think you just take a big deep breath and just figure out where you're going to start. Just figure out where that first place is that you're going to start. Whether that's clinic defense, whether that's women's access to healthcare that is women driven, where women have agency, or whether that's protecting our trans community, or whether that means climate change, or whether that means, equity in terms of income, inequality. My counsel would be figure out which door you're going to open, walk through that door, and just go. And just go.
Well, students, if you would all come on camera so I can see you and others can enjoy the creators, those who made this work happen. It's so remarkable for me to see these films again and to know that they're going to be accessible for people for the history, for going forward. Link, I'm curious to hear from you and Drew and Lily. How does it feel to carry these legacies with you now? Like, I don't know, however you want to approach that question. And it might be paired with like, now that you own these legacies, what's next? So what?
Yeah. Hey guys. All right, Drew. First, I want to thank Rabbi Camille, for all that you do, for showing us a beautiful model of authenticity, bravery, and community. Like, I am very honored to have been part of your class this semester. I'm a returned psychology student, and I think that I had a very unique perspective in this class, because I am 42 years old. I'm coming back from the Navy and going to school, and I was sort of the generation in between the up and coming students and our elders, right? So I've been sort of participatory in the Prop 8 in California in 2008. I was in the Navy when Don't Ask, Don't Tell was overcome. So I've done my fair share of activism in those senses. And it was also really cool to get the perspective of the generation that came before me, because I know that I've seen things change, like albeit slowly and quickly at the same time. It seems like a paradox of like, look how far we've come and look how far we still have to go. So it was really an honor to hear from Mike, our elder, and get that perspective of been there, done that. Here's how you move forward. Here's the path that has already been sort of forged for you. This is how you continue to forge for the future generation. And it was a beautiful model of activism, and I'm honored to have been a part of it. When I graduated high school in the year 2000, there was probably over 900 in my graduating class in Orlando, Florida, and there was 4 of us that were out as gay. So to walk on university campus in the United States of America and have an LGBTQ community and professors that are willing to stand up and say, hey, this is our community and we're going to be there for everyone is like such an honor. And I've been honored to have been a participant in it. And thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
Drew, you want to jump in? And then I know we have 9 minutes. Our prayer at the end will probably take us 1 minute. So, Drew.
Yes, hello everyone. My name is Drew. I am a fourth year student in the Critical Diversity Studies program, and I'm also the queer student representative for the undergraduate student senate body on the USF campus. And I, again, just like kind of echoing what everyone else has said, taking this course has been such a unique and privileged experience, and I think kind of circling back to what Sydney said earlier about being in the particular program that I'm in, I'm also in the gender and sexuality studies concentration. And so a lot of the classes that I've taken thus far, we do kind of learn about LGBTQ plus history. But in a lot of those classes, what you're learning about, specific dates in history, specific events, the names of people associated with those events, but what you're not getting a lot of the time is the actual stories behind the people that were involved and the stories of what it was actually like to be involved in these different events throughout queer history. And I think what Rabbi Camille has done a really good job with in this course is encouraging my generation of queer individuals to actually learn in depth those stories from people who actually lived that history. And it's something that's been really important to me to kind of just be in this experience and learn from our elders. And something that was really important to my group specifically as we were creating our video for Mike was not only including his stories, but also including some of the names that he mentioned of the people that he lost to the AIDS epidemic specifically. Because, for me, as I was thinking about it, Mike is here to be able to have this experience and to be able to have his knowledge and his experience archived in this way. But all of the queer elders who we did lose to the AIDS epidemic aren't here to have that experience. And I felt like it was really important to ensure that their names were not forgotten and that they are continued to bring into current modern spaces. And, as someone who's done my own social justice and activism work throughout the last few years, having all of this knowledge and carrying it with me now as I continue to do more social justice and activism work throughout my life, and making sure that the current work that's being done in the gay rights and queer rights movement is continuing to be informed by what has come before us and the people who've come before us and the work that they've done, I think is something that's really important.
Thank you, Drew. I did promise that we'd let people from the audience ask a question, and we're running out of time. So, Isaiah, if there's anyone who has put something to you, otherwise, I know I want to hear from Lily, and we have a blessing for our queer elders that we want to offer. So Lily, jump in.
Yeah, and I'll try my best to keep it brief, but it really has been such a wonderful experience to take this course. And I am a third-year public health student at the University of San Francisco, and Mike has some experience being on the San Francisco Health Commissioner or director at the UCSF AIDS Research Center. And so it was just really important for me to be able to also kind of get a look into somebody who spent their professional life working on health and improving community health. I also like speaking to the intergenerational side of things. I feel that many people see a barrier between generations, in particular between those who have a really, distinct age difference. And I know that some of my friends and other young activists find it difficult to find common ground with older folks, whether due to ideological differences or just misconception. And while that may be true in some instances, there's a ton to gain from promoting those conversations. And in Mike's case in particular, he's incredibly politically savvy, and we really didn't debate much at all with him, but rather that we got to learn from his commitment to activism and our own commitment to activism, and hear about his work with HIV and AIDS, and also what he's done to document history and honoring people from his life, with helping with the AIDS Memorial Park in San Francisco, in the Golden Gate Park, where we got to go with him on a little excursion, and with the scholarships that he's sponsored, and even like writing prose like the one that was featured in our film. He does a really beautiful job of honoring people in his life. So it feels really cool to continue to establish that pattern and continue to honor him going forward.
Thank you. You're also articulate. I wish you were going to be my students and we could do it all over again. Before we end with a prayer, I want to thank my elders. All the elders featured in our courses have been teachers and mentors and colleagues of mine, and in particular, Michael Shriver and Nancy Gonkard today. And I mentioned to you the Siddur. Here's a great link for you. I can put it also in the chat. It's a wonderful resource, and my teachers who helped me think how I could put this course together are mentioned here. And then above all, it's you, our students, who are my inspiration, who teach me and who show up, and you're carrying our history forward. And I just can't tell you how reassuring that is. So for all of us who are here, we offer our blessings for our elders, and I ask my students to lead us.
For our elders, may the one who blessed our ancestors, Sarah, Abraham, Isaac, Rebecca, Jacob, Rachel, and Leah, bless all those here who have risen today to honor the source of life and the Torah. By this merit, may they be granted long life and much laughter, and be kept from trouble, hardship, and worry. May they always find a blessing in friends and experience learning, teaching, and support with those throughout the generations. May they never feel left out or hemmed in or pushed away. May they find love where they will, in peace and safety. And may we always treasure them, for are we not told to have compassion for the elders of Israel, the scholars, and the righteous? And so together we say, may you find success and satisfaction in your labors, purpose and direction in your study, fun and carefree opportunity in your play. May you attain the wisdom that comes with 120 full seasons. May God bless you and all who sail with you, along with all Israel and the whole world. Let us say, Amen.
Amen. Let's hear it, everybody. Amen.
Amen.
Well, blessings to all of you. The goal for me in bringing you together and offering this webinar is that people will see what is possible for their own communities, and work across generations to interrupt loneliness and isolation, which is actually one of the things that was always going on in our classes and our weekly meetings. I felt less lonely. I do feel less lonely knowing that we have this community built on memory and our future advocacy and work to liberation. So that concludes our formal webinar. If you have questions or comments for us, or you want our autographs, we're going to stick around for a few minutes. Otherwise, share it with your friends and be in touch. Thank you so much. Back to you, Mark.
Thank you so much, Camille, Harley, Hillary, Sydney, Lily, Lincoln, Drew, for this fascinating and inspiring presentation. And thanks to all of you who participated and listened and offered comments and encouragement. Within a few days, you will all receive an email with a link to a recording of tonight's program that you can share with friends and colleagues. If you are interested in more opportunities to explore the history of queer religious movements, check out the LGBTQ Red website and particularly our events page. There you will find announcements of future online programs as well as recordings of past presentations. Our next webinar will be on February 19th, a collaboration with WATER, the Women's Alliance for Theology, Ritual, and Ethics, to present Charlotte Bunch, lesbian feminist activist with religious roots, in conversation with Mary E. Hunt. Then, on March 27th, LGBTQ hosts an in-person gathering, honor the recipient of the 2024-25 Virginia Remy Mollenkott Award, awarding outstanding scholarship in queer religious history. This will be at Chicago Theological Seminary. And if you are not in the Chicago area to participate in person, you can also watch via live stream. Go to the events page on our website for more details and to sign up for these groundbreaking online programs. In closing, I remind you that LGBTQN is the first and foremost source of information on LGBTQ plus religious history. We are a very small operation that is funded through the generosity of friends like you. So if you would like to see more programs like this one, and if you share our commitment to ensure that future generations will hear our voices and stories, please help make this happen with your gift. You can either go to giveq.org. Again, that's giveq.org on your phone, tablet, or laptop, or click on the donate button on the website homepage. With your credit card in hand, it only takes a couple of minutes to make a gift. Your gift will make a difference. On behalf of everyone, I offer much gratitude to Camille and the University of San Francisco students for their enlightening presentation. Good night to all.